So hello, everybody. It's me, Dan Doyle again. I talked a little bit about automation engineer yesterday, and what I'd like to do today is talk about the customer portals initiative. Um, a lot of this has kind of been spoiled throughout the rest of this conference already. There's been lots of hints dropped here and there about the things that I'm going to talk about, so there might not be any earth-shattering revelations, but I want to at least go into a little bit more depth on what we're doing and why, and provide a little background there. So before we get into it, I wanted to provide a little bit of background as to sort of why we've been pushing this along. And to do that, it's going to get a little bit philosophical or metaphorical, just for a little bit though. So I was poking around on the internet. I was trying to find some inspiration, some good ways to explain why this is such an important thing. And I came across this quote and I thought it was incredibly apt. It's pretty short. It simply says that numbers have an important story to tell, but they rely on you to give them a clear and convincing voice. So, when I'm looking at this, one of the things that immediately leaps out to me is that one of the things that GlobalNOC does, that we all do, GlobalNOC and you all as well, is we collect a lot of numbers, right? This could be tickets, calls, alarms, interface stats, CPU stats, people, how many people are connected to a firewall. That list goes on and on. And every one of those stats is collected for a reason, right? It's an important stat to collect or we wouldn't be doing it. It might be useful to justify network upgrades. It might be useful for what you use for customer billing, or just might be useful to give you a picture of what's going on. But one of the things that is tricky about this is, how do you get that story to be told, basically? Or so maybe another way of saying this really is a phrase that probably a lot of people are familiar with. Is the idea of a picture is being worth 1,000 words, right? So, what I mean by this is we've got all this different data. We've got it collected, all these alarms, all these stats, everything like that. What are we going to do to actually make sense out of all of that, right? Many of the tools out there that we already provide, like AlertMon or Snap or things like that, are really good at the fundamental level of these issues. Like, they can show you what's alarming, what tickets are these alarms acknowledged to, but they don't really give you anything higher level than that. They don't, for example, tell you what customers are impacted. They don't tell you, what's the overall availability of your network right now. So, in a nutshell, we've got thousands of words. How do we make pictures out of them? And the real thing at play here is this idea of signal to noise. This is a well understood concept in electrical engineering. And the idea is that, 20 years ago, having the network go down to most people was probably an annoyance, right? It wasn't mission critical to a lot of things. But today, it brings down industry, research, cat videos, everything that's really important, right? It comes to a screeching halt if the network goes down. But at the same time, it's more complex than ever to understand, is the network down, right? We have things like redundancy that are built in. We have things that are happening, like software-defined network changes that happen rapidly, that, the network might look different 1 minute to the next. And just simply the sheer, physical size of the network footprint might be larger and larger. And so in a nutshell, we basically have a lot of data here, but if you don't organize it in a sensible way, it's really just noise, right? Too many words is noise. Too many applications, too much data. And to be clear, having more data is definitely better than the alternative, right? You can make sense out of noise. You can't make sense out of nothing. But what we really are trying to push here is drawing some interesting pictures out of this. So there's already a couple of people who are lined up to talk about various portals that we've been developing over the past time frame. So I'm not going to go and steal their thunder. I'm going to focus on this particular one that is a use case that we developed for ourselves, that's internally focused on a lot of the systems that we provide for people here as well. So on the right side, you might open up Slack and I might go into one of the public channels and I would see any one of the phrases on the right side, right? Hey, is mail down for somebody? I can't log into this router. The DB isn't loading. AlertMon isn't refreshing, right? And anytime that happens, that pulls somebody away from what they're doing. They have to go look on it and then, provide a response that says, oh yeah, we know that's a problem or something like that, or hey, can you please put in a ticket or whatever. We already have the data that answers all of these questions, right? We monitor all of these systems here, whether it's the bastions, the mail servers, the AAA stacks, et cetera. We have a lot of robust monitoring there. We have all of the data that users already have or need to answer these questions, but it makes two pretty big assumptions that I, as the user, understand what it means, for the bastion to be up or down, right? Like I would have to know what checks are relevant here. And I would also have to know as the user where to look for this information in the first place. Maybe I don't know if this is a redundant service or not. I don't know where AlertMon is. Maybe I don't even have access to AlertMon, right? So as we're looking towards answering and resolving these common problems, what we are able to do is to distill all of that information away from the user and provide a very simplified view like we have here on the left that answers that question without the user having to know any of those things. So we can see here on the left, everything's working. If something turns red and says it's not working, well, you don't have to let us know about that. We already know. We found out about it through the monitoring system because it's the same set of data that we're looking at here. You don't have to bug anybody except maybe to say, any, any ETA on resolution maybe, right? We already know there's a problem. So that was all the preface as sort of why this has been a priority, right? So this was a priority last year, and we're making it a priority again this year. I think we've seen a lot of success stories here, and I'm hopefully not putting my foot in my mouth here. I'm hoping we're going to hear a lot of success stories, later on once I'm done talking here. And as we continue to move forward in this year, we're looking to help interested parties to create more of these dashboards. We need your help to understand the particulars of your use case, but we'll build it for you. We're really just looking for input from you to help understand what it is you need and maybe how your data is laid out. All right. As we let's go ahead and take a look here at the main focus points that I want to talk about basically for the upcoming year. And I broke them down into 5 sections here. So we've got authentication, reporting, interactivity, business logic, that one was really hard to name, and quantity. So for the next year, this is what we as GlobalNOC have identified as major areas of portals that we want to focus on. That's not to say that this is the only bit that we'll be working on. We do actually spend a fair amount of time doing things like testing upgrades to the integration with TSDS or ServiceNow or something like that, or verifying new versions of, say, Grafana or something like that to make sure that everything will keep working. Where we got these areas from are a mixture of 2 main sources. One of which was we've been told explicitly by you all that this is something that we're really interested in having a new capability for. That makes that really easy. The second one is a little bit more subtle, which is as we've built out more of these and we've worked with different networks to build them out, we see patterns emerging, right? We see that there are some common use cases. And we think that being able to integrate these more from the ground up will actually be a benefit to everybody, even if you're not maybe consciously thinking about this right now. So let's take a look at each of these areas in some more depth. So first up is authentication. One of the common requests that we get for these portals is the ability to integrate with more authentication providers, right? Today, it requires that you have a GlobalNOC account because that's how the authorization works under the hood. But you might, for example, or you might have GlobalNOC credentials and you can log in and access it, but maybe your end users don't. Maybe your VP or your C-level people, they might have a GlobalNOC account, they might not, but they might prefer to use their regular auth provider rather than having to manage another one here. Or maybe you just have some colleagues that you work with where it'd be useful to share this data, but getting a GlobalNOC account for them is just kind of awkward, right, for this one very, very specific use case. Um, Today, we've actually rolled out the first of these. This was spoiled earlier today. We're working with NOAA, for example, to integrate with a variety of other identity providers. So, in addition to the actual N-Wave authentication, we can authenticate users from the Department of Commerce and other departments within that environment as well, without them having to have GlobalNOC accounts. And it all basically just works the same as you'd expect it to. What this also brings to the table is the ability to provide more fine-grained access to the data in portals. This has been another frequently requested ability. Today, we pretty much break down the data according to private views. Certain users can log in and take a look at this, and public views, which still might require logins, but it might be a different set of users. One thing that we've heard requests for is the ability to say that a user from a particular department logs in, that they might be automatically directed to a particular partitioned view that here is just the data for your department. Or, for example, we might want to, in some cases, partition this data to avoid information disclosure. It's not just a UX experience here of being directed to the right view. We might not want members from organization A to be able to see data about organization B at all. So what this really does is it sets the groundwork that allows all of these things to be supported. When we talk about business logic, again, like I said, this one was pretty hard to name for me. When we talk about this, what I really mean is being able to implement something more than a basic query in your dashboard. And what I mean by that is that early dashboards that we developed are more straightforward, right? And this is pretty organic, right? It's a low barrier to get going with. We're able to get something out of the door very quickly, and they're largely gated around what I would call simple queries, even though if you're unfamiliar with the system, they may look fairly complicated. I really mean that I can get my answer by issuing out to an API one request. And that has worked actually for a surprising amount of cases. We've been very happy with that, but not all cases. Your networks are seldom simple, right? And the use cases are seldom simple. And so naturally what we want to do is build up a system that supports multiple queries or some complex business logic. And what I mean by that, let's take a look at maybe some examples. I might want to, for example, show maintenances that are coming up in the next 2 or 3 days. But if it's Thursday or Friday, I need to do a little bit more logic where I really want to show, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday, right? And I want to wrap around the week a little bit. That's not super complicated, but it's more than you can do because it's, got some logic in it. Or I want to show whether or not my firewall service is up or down, but it's deployed in a redundant manner. And there's a variety of checks that I actually need to look at to give you an accurate determination of is it up or down, or maybe if it's up, down, or degraded. I can't simply look at one thing and be able to give you an answer to that. I have to understand how it's architected on the back end, and I have to coalesce a variety of different data sources behind it to give you that answer. So in order to support this, what we've started doing on a number of these portals is writing this custom middleware that exists. And what it does is it sits between the various GlobalNOC backends and then the UI that we would use, most of the time Grafana, and it understands how to implement all of that business logic. And this has been attractive, I think, for a variety of reasons. We're able to get that same level of customization that people, I think, have come to expect from the GlobalNOC without also at the same time adding a tremendous burden onto us to support 10 different applications, all of which require custom development. Since we're reusing data stores that we already have, and we're reusing front-end technologies that are pretty flexible, all we have to really do here is write a little bit of glue in the middle there that ties them all together in the way that you need. So as we move forward, we expect that we'll do more of this. I think we have a pretty good pattern at this point that's been established. All right, the next topic, interactivity or read-write capability. Again, this is another one that got spoiled earlier on here. So the current portals are read-only because in a lot of cases, that's really what you want, right? We display data to users and the users can never alter that data. You just, take it out and you say, okay, this was my 95th percentile usage, or this is how much traffic I'm passing right now. Yeah, great. But we've seen an increase in the number of requests for users to be able to send data back into a GlobalNOC system. We talked, for example, about maybe contact updates, for example, or the work that's been going on in the notification intent panel as well, where a user logs in and not only can they see what their current notification subscriptions are, but they're then able to change them and save them back all within the confines of that same portal. So you can imagine you could put both of those into the same portal, right? You log in, here's your customer, here's your contact information. Feel free to change it if anything's out of date. And here are your notifications. And you get that kind of all in one nice little experience here. We've also talked, for example, about requests where a member might come in and they might notice a problem in the data that's being shown. Not that the data itself is problematic, but it represents, hey, I'm seeing a high amount of packet loss on this particular connection. I'd like to, wouldn't it be nice if I could just click a button directly from, that member page? A little form shows up. It already knows who I am, what organization I'm from, what interface I'm looking at, what time frame I'm looking at. It's already got all of the information that somebody would need to put into a ticket. Wouldn't it be great if it just opened up a little form, I add a little bit of text, hit go, and voila, a ticket goes out into something like ServiceNow, and a user can take it from there. There's a lot of other ones that we're considering here. Like I said, opening a trouble ticket about a poorly performing interface, seeing and even updating a list of tickets that are related to you, updating your contact info, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, we've had the first one of these deployed successfully. So we've verified that, the capability is definitely there. It's definitely possible. I think it's really just a matter of working to continue to build these out. Reporting. This is one of the ones that has been asked for by some people, but has really been an emerging trend observation more than anything else. Many of the dashboards that we build today are focused primarily on providing users with the status of something right now, right? Is this thing up? Am I passing traffic right now? Those sorts of, tactical level information. And even though on a lot of these you could say zoom out and change the time range to the last year or something, it's still fundamentally not based around summary data. It's really based around operational status. But what we've been seeing is more of an interest in what I would call, or some might call, KPI metrics that we can derive out of these. Think about things like, for example, what was your overall availability of this member over the last quarter or this particular backbone circuit? Sure, we can pull up an interface graph and we can look at whenever it had outages and all of that, but it would be perhaps cleaner if that was just distilled down into something that was there automatically and just, gave you a number back at the end of the day, or gave you the graph and the number at the end of the day. How many trouble tickets did we, handle for this particular member or on this particular backbone, right? What's the breakdown of alarms that we handled over the last month? How many 10 gig ports do I still have available in my network, right? Do I need to start buying optics, for example? And like with most of the themes in these dashboards, most of this is data that we already have. It just isn't really accessible or hasn't been put together in a way that answers these in a metrics focused way. Some of these might already exist as reports. I know, for example, Internet2 in particular has a bunch of these that are really cool to take a look at. Or they might exist as something that one of you does by hand today, and that might be a script, or it might be somebody in the service desk, or it might be you going around to a couple of UIs. But that takes time. It has the human error factor, and it's sometimes hard to reproduce, right? If you asked me to reproduce a report I did by hand 6 months ago, I could probably get close to it, but I probably do some things different because I wouldn't remember exactly what I did. If instead we could build these all in here where they're just generated on demand, we can free up time, make them highly repeatable, and remove that human element factor. And lastly, quantity. This is perhaps the easiest one to talk about. Over the last year, I think we've seen really good success in this space, and we really want to keep up the momentum here, both in terms of general purpose dashboarding and also the custom ones that require the input from you all about how to make it actually work. As we go back to the earlier part of this conversation, and we're talking about noise and signal to noise and all of that, I think that what we've really seen here is that when we have a well thought out and well implemented dashboard, you really can cut through a lot of that noise and get right to the heart of something a lot quicker. Even if all that it does is save you 5 minutes once a week, that really adds up. If what I want to do is come in and take a look at my Internet 2 connections and my commodity connections and just simply have that as a saved view, if there's nothing special about it, that sort of operational efficiency is one of those things that can really start to snowball and end up saving a lot of time down the line. And because this is an organizational priority for GlobalNOC, we're committed to helping you implement them. It does require some amount of time from you. We do need to understand the peculiars of your wants, how this data might be laid out in the DB, or exactly what you're hoping to get. But as far as the actual implementation goes, you never need to learn how to write a query or set up a panel or anything like that. We'll take care of all of that for you. We'll even help suggest what we've seen work for other people if you're not entirely sure. The important part is really just get that conversation started. All right, so at this point, you're probably tired of listening to me talk, and with portals and picture metaphors and signal to noise ratios. So what we thought would be really good is if we could get some time to hear from some of you all about some of the work that's been going on in this space, what use cases you're looking to solve, how you use the data, and maybe what you're looking at next. So with that, Corey, I'll turn it back. Well, let me pause there first for any questions or comments. Nope. Okay, then Corey, I'll turn it over to you as maestro here, and you can start calling on people. I know we've got a couple of volunteers.
Yeah, we got a couple of people lined up. I think we're going to start with CEN. Ryan, I don't know if you want to jump on here and talk about your dashboards and, show what you've done this year. You got some cool stuff going on.
Sure. So, hi, everybody. My name is Ryan, CEN Director, avid GlobalNOC user. I don't know. But so ours was one of, I wouldn't call it a portal per se, but it's a service status dashboard where we were really just trying to convey back to the membership what is actually the status of any given major service at CEN as a better communication tool. And it was really born out of strategy sessions that we had a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, around, hey, what else should we do for the membership? How could they help, in some cases, solve their own problems, right? Like, what could we display that they could see, yes, there was an outage, or yes, there is something going on. Yes, it does affect me, or potentially even put us in the clear, right? Now there's nothing really going on. Maybe I should check internally a little bit more. Nonetheless, it was kind of the initial concept, and then around where we, wanted to potentially take this. And we did most of our work with JD, and I don't know if he's on right now, but I'll give him kudos, not to suggest that there weren't other folks here helping get it up and done, but I believe he was doing most of this in the background for what you see today. So I do have it up. You guys can see it, walking through it a little bit, and hopefully most of it's self-explanatory because that's the intent. Weather map, which is a nice feature that folks actually get a kick out of, that every time we do our annual conference and they see the weather map, that we would actually show the backbone utilization at any given moment and what's going on with, I'll say, congestion or potential congestion in the network. Certainly a good eye candy feature that goes over well. And again, we have that out there at any given moment. You can click on these, you can zoom on these, and if we have two views on this about the CEN routed core, meaning the layer 3 backbones, as well as our peers and caches and what's going on there, just to see what the activity is looking at for peering being in the Boston, New York area, coming back in the network, and caches being the other ones about how well utilized they get. Kind of fun and interactive there. We tend to leave it on the router just to see what's going on visually for ourselves, where we may have warm spots and what's going on. And on the right side here, core network nodes, network members, core routers, all that stuff of a really simple stoplight kind of mentality. And, most of us in the network world that are used to any level of, status monitoring, green is good, red is bad. And, the amber or yellow or whatever, somewhere in between. So that way, again, there could be a quick dashboard for anybody on the outside looking at it saying, is there an issue? Some of these, and this is what we're looking to still develop, would be around information that could bring you to a sub dash. What's going on at a service level, and in this case, so iBoss is a filtering company that we use for K-12 and libraries. We have on-net devices that we monitor. We put that in the clear view so you can check throughput and or connections on any of these things. We have new and old, so you'll see stores and legacy, things like that. And you can always check at the throughput and or the connections per played, which are two key stats there, and develop it either way. And it rolls back up into the parent one. And I know I'm moving quickly, but I'm going to keep going. Other stuff that we had as a need, and anybody in the Northeast can kind of appreciate this as of recent, is over the last 4 years, we've had more storms roll through the Northeast than we care to ever have. And they've been, wildly impactful to power, the layer zero kind of stuff around the network and around the state, where we've listed out members that have been down that have been, half the state almost, and it's a very manual process. And we needed a better way to communicate around that. So the announcements band gives us that opportunity just to call out folks and do customizations there. And as we give out incremental updates as to what's going on with status around the state, we can list them out by name saying, look, we already know you're down. And we can help shorten the list and just please check back in periodically, or just do custom things that are going on. And then the bottom one for the current events. So maintenance, these project out, I think 3 weeks is where we settled. So if you're planning stuff, at your member site, you can always look well in advance, sorry about that, as to what's going on, so they can plan around that for any scheduled maintenances, as well as ongoing outages that may be happening at the time, or past outages. Again, they're looking to say, hey, did something happen that I wasn't aware of, and should be concerned with. And I mentioned this on the earlier call around the CRMs. We do need to publish our secret decoder ring as to what some of these sites are. So we have sort of a cryptic way of calling out our devices and or locations. Sometimes it's not that obvious. If you know the Connecticut tax codes, it becomes more apparent. But adding little things like that in as to what's going on, if you see a cryptic name on a device that's not quite well translated back into a member name. We do our best to see stuff like this where Connecticut State, Central Connecticut State University is an actual member, and they can see that there's an ongoing issue. Same thing with common things with, either Internet 2 or other things, but this little cryptic thing right there, ENLB078 Triple H F52, may not be all that obvious to folks. So you kind of got to do the internal and the external naming of things so that it's more apparent. And again, I wouldn't call it a portal per se, but it at least is a good centralized dashboard as to what is going on throughout the network that folks can go back to and understand, is there something down? Can I get a quick answer? And communicate better with the members. That's kind of it in a nutshell. This is the way we prefaced it when we announced it. This is version 1. We're going to continue to refine this stuff and, add more tiles to the board that are more meaningful. A couple of the concepts there are, around aggregate uptime, which is another stat that externally facing that we show publicly, and that's fine. Another one is a little bit of the customer satisfaction stuff, where we have members that give us actually great feedback, and we want to understand where that is. We don't mind putting that out in the clear, but we would like to know what that looks like in general before we put that out in the clear. Is it appropriate? So we ask those kind of questions internally before we make it fully external. And the overall engagement with the GlobalNOC team has been great. We love the iterative process. There's a lot of back and forth of, I will ask crazy questions. I will draw on napkins. I will give them what I think are okay sketches. They always ask clarification questions. Is it something like this? In some cases, it may be a horrible drawing that got translated into a, something that's beautiful, like a dashboard like this, or a lot of back and forth that, then appears as something visual that's very handy. So this is one of a few that we're kind of working on that with GlobalNOC. This is the most externally facing that we added to our website that we want our members to get used to referencing if anything they think is gone awry upstream with us as the provider. They have at least a centralized spot to go look and say, what is going on with firewall services? Are there any issues in there that suggest that there's a degradation or unavailable service that may impact me? They should be able to go and look. That way they're not, well, ideally, hopefully it's reducing the amount of calls or anything that may come in, but at least they can go poke around and see what issues may be going on, or even surface one that we don't know about. But to Dan's earlier talking points, yeah, we may already know, but now they can find their own answer, which is great. And we ideally have already reached out and said, we're on it, which is one of the best things that we get feedback on, is that they still say, even with other, service providers that they work with in other instances, they don't get anybody that actually reaches out to them saying, hey, we noticed that you guys are having an outage. Can you help us understand what's going on over there? That's like unheard of, seemingly in the Connecticut landscape, or maybe even beyond that, but something that gives us real value add back to folks that we connect, that they're still almost floored they get a phone call before they even notice in some cases. So that's a big kudos that I'll give the GlobalNOC team and the partnership that we have, and something that we really want to reinforce and keep going as a very positive thing. So with that, I'll wrap it up and say that's kind of it. We'll hand it off to the next presenter, and we'll be here to field questions later if there's any that are floating around.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. That's good. I love the CEN dashboard. I talk about it all the time when I talk to people about what we can do. So next we're going to have Noah kind of talk about their dashboards. Adam Nemethy is going to talk about some of them. So I'll hand it off to Adam here.
Okay, thank you. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to kind of quickly go and kind of where we started. So we used to ask to build, these are more just a couple of interfaces that we have to view. So this is one customer particularly that has a very critical product. And anytime we have an outage near one of these areas or some issue, I immediately go to this graph to see, is this person impacted? Because I know that creates lots of additional meetings for myself and things to look at. So that was kind of one of this. So I use this quite a bit just to identify that one customer. And this is another kind of one-off thing that we had created. So we're starting to really focus on IPv6. And what we wanted to be able to do was track how many IPv4 addresses and IPv6 addresses are on the network. And then we wanted to be able to track that over time so that we could kind of show the progression and how we're steadily increasing the IPv6 and reducing the IPv4. We're in the early stages of that, as you might be able to tell by the numbers there. And then we got into, much like the other dashboard that was shown, into a status dashboard. And every morning there's a CIO call where we present, and the things we have to go over are current status of the network, what's down. We need to talk about outages and maintenances. And before, this was a process that took 30 to 45 minutes to compile the information. Service desk would have to actually manually submit an Excel document, all the changes, all the outages that happen, upcoming maintenances, and they would send that to a group, and that group would have to take it out of that Excel spreadsheet and then add it to a different format and compile that with everybody else's. We were able to stop all that and just present from this dashboard. So in the morning on the CIO call, the presenter just literally clicks on the link and then we talk to the dashboard. So what took 30 to 45 minutes now literally takes no time, except for the fact that I do want to look and see what outages are currently there so I can speak to those at the call. So we'll say, it's down to 5 minutes max. And what we have here is there's logic built into these. There's multiple devices that comprise these, what we call tie caps. So for instance, in the DC tie cap, one device can be down, but it's still fully functional until the check mark remains green. So this actually signifies if the service is working and available. If we have any of our AX sites down, this number changes. You get a 1 there, and the name of the device will show up here. And the backbone, if any part of the link is down, it'll show red. And the part of this, which the weather thing, I will, just like the previous person, people get a big kick out of the weather on the map. They do for us as well. For instance, if this link is down up here, we can easily just see through this that all the sites can reroute through other links on the backbone. So we can say this backbone interface is down, but you can see everything can still connect all the dots. And then outages are the same way. We've had similar issues where when we started using dashboards, we had to look at naming on how we do stuff. And that's an ongoing process to make sure that it's, it means something to the customer. We do the same thing. So current outages, our past outages were the last 24 hours. Our maintenances are the next 48 hours, which does account for weekends, and then it'll stretch into the next work week. And then maintenances that were just completed show up there at the bottom. The other item that we moved into is participant dashboards. And this is so this customer can come to a dashboard. They can see any alerts that would show up for equipment that their service is on. They can see tickets related to equipment that their services are on. And then they get just a quick dashboard of all their sites. These are separated by POP. So some POPs have multiple devices that they have with us in it. Some just have one. They can see all that. And then you can get the aggregate graphs for all those locations. And there's also this item at the top in the detailed view that they can click in. And now they can just get your normal snap graph data for all their interfaces. And we do this we do this for most of our customers. And that went into, you were on earlier when I briefly gave a comment about the notifications. One of the items that we're able to do more automatically with the notifications in the future is to build these based off of that FISM ID. And so every connection is already labeled and it's just automatic. It builds the dashboards for the customers. And similar to what was mentioned before, what we're trying to do is get everything kind of hierarchical linked. So you may start at this, and then maybe there's customers linked or listed down here at the bottom, and you can click on yourself and you can get to the next board. You can click on that link and you can get down deeper into that. And so for the, the upper management level, they care about this view. I want to see right now, does the service work or does it not work? Then you get to the customer, they want to see their stuff. And then the engineer that's like, well, I want to see more than just, is it up or down? I want to see, consistency in our graphs. I want to see X. I want to look at it for troubleshooting and see what's going on. So we have those same visions going forward about how this works, where you can actually click in here and get an output of what those are. We opted to not do yellow on ours because we were really signifying, is the service up or down? And then another page that was built specifically for NOAA, which is the COPE dashboard, it shows anytime there's an alarm on a device that the device will show red, but that's not indicative of anybody's service being impacted. And so taking what we have there, we really wanted to just be able to quickly show, is something actually impacted or not? Then I'll move into this one. So this was a unique one for a customer where they have all these ships that are out, and based on they have different types of connectivity that they can use. And so the ask here was, A, what kind of connectivity are they on? And B, it also, there's a way by looking at the connectivity and what's up and what's down to identify if the ship is out to sea or at port, so that they can look at that and tell, and then they can see traffic patterns and stuff for all their ships. Like anything else, you can, select different connections that you want to see or select the different ships individually. With the other ones, you can go over time. So one other item that I really wanted to hit on was what we currently do with dashboards now is we look at items that save us time, that specifically like Dan was talking about, this dashboard was an answer to save us time in the mornings. There's no reason that we had to spend that much time recreating things that we already had when we could just compile it in one spot. We actually have something coming up, and I was really impressed with the talk because we every month do availability statistics. And now quarterly, we have to do quarterly availability statistics, and these go to like higher than us, to Department of Commerce and things. So what do we do every month? We have people work to get that information by pulling it from various parts. And we want to put that in a dashboard. So, and kind of how we flow with that is the dashboard will be created, validate that the numbers are accurate, and we'll start sending screenshots as that report. And in a short amount of time, what we found is that we can actually just then send a link. Now we never even communicate to them with this. They go to the link whenever they want. They can go back as long as they want for availability on all these. They see it, forget about it. We don't deal with it anymore. And that's really where we want to be. Regardless of the availability metrics, we're not hiding any information. We want the availability good. We strive hard to do that. But if it's not good, we're not hiding that. Like the availability is there. We want people to be able to see these metrics and items like that. And that's the same thing with the customer dashboards. We see a lot of times when we work with other partners that they're reluctant to show kind of some of this stuff because they don't want to show if there's issues going on. But again, we want the customers to be able to see, to be transparent. They can see all of that and they can ask questions and we have to answer to that. And again, that makes us provide a better service. So actually already have an email thread going that I started with David the other day about setting up a meeting specifically to talk about dashboard with the availability metrics. So I'm excited to do that. And we have similar experience, I would say that very helpful. We've done a lot with JD, we've done a lot with Dan, and it's a very interesting process because you learn a lot about what you want in the process. Because at first you say, well, I want this. You're like, okay, how do we get that? These are some of the nuances. Let's look through that. And eventually you get to a more polished product that really meets what you were looking for. So we've been greatly impressed as well with the dashboards. It's grown a lot, and we're looking to the future, and we have a lot more that we want to do, and it's been great. So I guess I'll leave it there. And thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. That was great. And again, we can do some questions at the end, kind of combine them all together. Now we're going to hop over to OneNet. They've got a slightly different dashboard. So Brian, I don't know if you're ready to talk about it.
Hey, yeah, I can show it. I'm going to say to Ryan and Adam, I'm very jealous of all that cool stuff. I think I missed a meeting. I didn't know all that was possible, but we getting a call. But anyway, one thing I didn't see.
That's part of the reason why we're all here, share these and get the information out about what all is possible.
OneNet's number one on the list now. They already said they're interested.
So this is our this dashboard kind of came from the old Snap stuff. So basically it's customer interfaces. And one thing that's kind of unique that Dan set up for us is that we use the GlobalNOC IP address management pieces. So when a customer hits this this portal from their IP address, is automatically this client switches to them. So they don't have to go poke anywhere. They just see their interfaces. Otherwise, they see OneNet, which is a big group. But if they're, for some reason, they're not off, I should probably check this first, but I like to pick on these guys because that's this little town I grew up in. You can just pick your entity from the list and see the graphs of the circuits that you have to your site. And that's pretty much all ours does. But
yeah, one of the things that's cool is the IP stuff, being able to show off of the IP. I know that some people talked earlier about keeping the IP addresses in the database. Having that information available has been a big help for the dashboards for OneNet.
yes.
I actually wrote that down as something I want to discuss. That's a very interesting feature.
Yeah, and that this is something that our customers used to have to go in. They have to know their circuit number, or they have to search through all the circuits. So that was a big win.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, which is that I don't think we should short sell how useful even a simple view like that is, because you get some random one of your end users may be the librarian at the school who runs the IT department, right? And them having to wade through all of that data and having to remember what their circuit ID is and all that's just not the best user experience, right? And worst case, they're grumpy they have to do it. Or I guess that's best case. Worst case, they look at the completely wrong thing and they come to the wrong conclusion, and now they're all freaking out about something that's not even reality, right? So anything that we can do to simplify that, I think, has significant wins.
And just to clarify, I mean, aren't things like the augmented traceroute tool dependent upon the IP address being in the DB? Or
yes, they are, although a little bit differently. So tools like the augmented traceroute report will learn network device IP addresses just based off of the auto populator. What Brian was talking about here is they've documented this particular school, for example, is say this/28 or 29 or 27, whatever the case may be. And so if a user arrives from within that subnet, we know that it's this school and we can just automatically show it to them instead of them having to choose from the list or anything like that. It's a relatively small quality of life improvement, but it's fairly significant, I think.
And it looks like you have a question you want to jump in real quick with.
Was that me?
Yeah.
Sorry, it was more of a comment. So one of the other things that we were working on was we've asked Daniel to help gather some stats for year-end reporting and to put that also in a dashboard view where we want to see certain things around, incidents open and resolved, admin up interfaces, backbone capacity, total backbone capacity, data transferred, mean time to resolution, and compare year to years on how are we progressing, right? So those are the stats, but the metrics are you improving or not against those, right? And since we have multiple years of this stuff, we always ask this, help us get the data for their annual reporting. We'd really want to see that stuff. And it was another concept of, gee, could we just stick this in like a dashboard? This one's more internal, but also somewhat external that we could very easily show, as well as, like I said before, the customer service side of this stuff is how are people reacting to some of these incidences that, they react to one way or another. Typically, in anybody that knows, when you send out the survey response after it's closed, the response rate is typically really small. So you got to kind of temper your expectations around who actually responds to those, and are they doing it because they're not that happy, which is some, or they're like, hey, this was great, and they're actually taking the time to respond to a survey with a big smiley face saying this was wonderful. What I found out is that ours is a little higher than what we may have expected in general, and pleasantly to our surprise, it's really high in the satisfaction. So like what are those things that, the CEN difference or the R&E difference, it's something that we could tout easily as a community that we do things different. And here's our proof, right? Ask one of our customers about what they think about it. And, it's the voice of the customer, voice of the member in the end for anybody that's new. Point back to a stat that is meaningful, that we get good responses on, that, people have the option to click on one way or the other. I'm not so happy, or I'm very happy, or somewhere in between. So we're pretty excited to see that come to life as well. And we put that in our annual report, but if we can do that as well as just check out what's going on. Here's another depth or breadth of the scope of the network and the community that you're part of. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome. We've got one more. I know we're a little bit, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Along those lines, Corey, you had provided us the metric before of how many times we do and are proactive versus reactive, with our members. That can drive complete behavior from a metric perspective. We could say we want to move from 20 to 1, to a 25 to 1 ratio over the next year or something like that. And then that might drive your tools and visibility and that kind of thing. The other thing I think we should, I think we're mixing in this subject who the customer is, because sometimes it's like Ryan and I, who are the customer, trying to drive metrics and business behavior and things like that at the REN level. And sometimes it's our member who is the customer. And we're mixing the tools around. I just want everybody to realize that we may have a very different hierarchy than an individual institution that's being served.
Yeah, and actually we're about to, we're going to actually hand it over to iLight. Theirs is, much more focused on the end user and what they're looking at. So Tom, you want to take it away on the iLight portal?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Corey. So our portal came out of necessity because we've always made our individual member, client, customer, or whatever phrase you want to use, traffic stats or measurement statistics available to them. And historically, as the network has grown, one of the things you can see here is our total number of interfaces has grown significantly. So for the membership that we have, to ask them to go to this view, which lists every single interface that exists, and sort out of 4,642 is a bit unrealistic. So enter, the portal and the Grafana and everything here everyone has talked about. We have instituted a way of sorting all this based upon individual member. So this is public. You can go to grafana.ilight.net and look at this information. And you can select, any number of the institutions that we have here that are customers or members of iLight. Incidentally, I like the, I think it was OneNet. Was it OneNet that had the auto selection of member based upon source IP? So that's an idea that I'd like to implement. Hint, Dan.
Dan's got a whole list now already.
I've had a lot of people
slacking
during this.
So I think that's very beneficial. But we just do this alphabetically, and it goes to Anderson because they're start at the beginning of the alphabet, and people select who they want. I will say that I know members look at this data because we don't get questions about where is my traffic utilization data today. We get traffic that, hey, my traffic utilization graph is broken, whether there's some sort of problem or there was an issue with the maintenance or an outage or something of that nature. So that tells me that they're looking at this and maybe somewhat reading between the lines, appreciate the organization. But then obviously they care that it's always available to them and make sure that it's up all the time. So for every individual member that we display, we've got 3 major categories, plus we have active and historical alarms. And that's all tied into the way we organize data out of the database. So we've got the 3 major categories are connection utilization, commodity usage, and research and education usage. And so we're using services in the GlobalNOC database, and I've selected the iLight network and the 3 service types and then sorted this by institution name. But we go in here and we'll create a commodity, a connection, and a research and education service for each of those categories. And so when we either add a new entity or we upgrade an entity from a 1 gig to a 10 gig, or maybe they add another location or something of that nature, or add additional port, we just have to go in after the actual provisioning work is done, update the service ID, and then it automatically just appears in their usage portal. So it's really the big win for us, other than the organization for the members, was making it so that it's an easy process to get that data that they care about for their individual connection information sorted into their particular view. And we do that by, like I said, in an individual service ID for like the connection, we list all the individual interfaces that are relevant to that particular institution. And then for the commodity and research and education services, we're using IP filters on the routers. And so therefore, the data that you see for like research and education isn't actually traffic or interface measurement data, but is actually a firewall counter on 2 routers, and that's aggregating it. And so that way we can, we're using IP address information that's in the database to be able to sort and differentiate that traffic, so that if they have just one common pipe and some of our members actually still default route to us, we can tell them how much of that traffic is research and education versus how much of it is commodity. So I think that's our stuff in a nutshell. I will say that with regards to the data, the thought that came to mind when Corey asked me about doing this was you get out of it what you put into it. And so the more effort you put into organizing the data in the database and working with someone like Dan or someone on his team to extract that data and visualize it in Grafana, it just pays dividends in the future and making it more efficient for you to, or for us and for you to keep this going and keep it updated in a relatively low touch way, as opposed to having to create a customized dashboard or a customized HTML page or something for every individual user that you might have.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. And I would say the effort that you guys put into cleaning up your data was definitely one of the more heroic efforts I've seen on getting the data clean and keeping it clean. All right, so we're a little bit over time here, but I think that the portals are a good thing. If anybody needs to take a break, we'll start automation in about 5 minutes. But 3:05, so you can take a break. If anyone has any questions and wants to hang around, Dan, are you okay with answering some questions real quick?
Yeah, I'll be here.
So 3:05 for the start of automation.
Hey, Dan.
James is my favorite guy. What's going on?
Oh, I sound sincere too. Hey, I've talked about this in the past, and I know I just pinged you in Slack to make sure it was okay to bring up, but I didn't know if any other folks had been interested or thought about leveraging some forecasting views on some of these links, especially in the portal, so that people can, have an option to turn that on, or at least from an engineering perspective or for the customer facing to see kind of based on trends over the past couple of years of data, where things are going. And I know that within TSDS, there were some Holt Winters tie-ins, and then I know that there's some new developments on time series forecasting that are pretty interesting. So I was just
yeah, it's a really good question, and it's one that I don't think I actually called it out, but in my head I had glossed over it in the reporting section, which is I think we've heard from a couple of folks. I know you and others have wanted to know a little bit about forecasting capabilities. And so when we talk about generalized reporting capabilities, I think that we would want to include that in the list. The exact details, I think, are probably a little bit TBD. One of the trickiest parts about RNA networks, for example, is if you were to look at a year graph, the traffic levels can vary wildly depending on where in the year we are, right? You can obviously see, Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, spring break, and the very long summer breaks for a lot of these networks, right? A lot of the traffic has big dips there. So it's a little bit of a tricky thing to forecast, but that isn't to say that it can't be done. So I think that, if there are people that are interested in trialing this out or have good known use cases for it, I mean, this would be something that I'd be personally very interested in doing. I do know that some people, I don't want to say inadvertently, but they do use this data like secondarily as a means to do some amount of forecasting, right? To be able to project either year over year growth to understand, is my network growing, staying the same, or how much is it growing, things like that. And I think that as we see those existing outside of these systems, it brings to me the question of, hey, if there are people who are taking this data and they're exporting it out to do this stuff, why not just bring it directly into the portal so that you can just do it right there?
And that brings up my second question, which is, what methods are there to? I mean, your presentation was great, by the way. I just did parts about feeding data into the system. It seemed very focused on maybe correlation events and stuff like that that we can provide and have Writable to help visualize some of that. But I didn't know if there was going to be an opportunity to maybe feed directly into time series database with certain things, like if we had stream of data that could be layered on to the forecast, to the regular S&P collected data, that we could then visualize it instead of having to pull it out into a separate visualization system.
Yeah, so are you asking about integrating, let's call it third-party data?
Yeah.
I think that I can't probably give a simple blanket answer to that, but I think in general that it's definitely something that we could look at. There's not a technological reason why we couldn't be doing that. When I talk about, for example, some of this complex logic or this business logic, things like that, that's maybe one example where it fits a little bit more organically, right? So that you can take data from, say, TSDS, and you can take data from this other system, and you can then overlay them on top of each other, or combine them in somehow, or compare them somehow, right? Do some sort of logic there and then get them out onto your portal. The only thing that I'm a little bit wary about is, we don't want to integrate with every third-party platform under the sun. It's just from a maintenance sustainability point of view, but it's particularly for common ones, say import data from, I don't know, Google Sheets or other known common places. I think that that's definitely doable.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if you maybe had a focused conversation with folks in the community that are interested in talking more about this in depth. I know we've got, I guess, coming back from break already, but I'd be interested in following up.
Yeah, I've added this to the list of potential user group topics, and going into more detail. You know, one of the things,
I had my same question, James. Are you talking about aggregate data for GPN, or are you talking about trending for individual schools?
I'm looking at it from multiple perspectives, but obviously when you're looking at the forecasting, you need to get more granular for a lot of this because you're going to see different patterns depending on individual users of circuits. But
It's funny because my inquiry actually goes the other way to a less aggregation and more individualized circuit reporting, right? So if you, I believe that the cloud traffic becomes at a payload or an individual payload level is becoming more important for visibility perspective than even aggregate data, because people are turning around and not, they're putting something in the cloud, but they never had it instrumented before they put it in the cloud, right? So they had no idea what kind of bandwidth they should be using, nor do they understand the latency to get there, right? And so we have a fair amount of requests to isolate the individual traffic going to cloud services, which is really interesting. It's kind of goes the other
isolate
way.
on a per VLAN or per port, or
yeah, like an RPI connect, into the cloud through Internet 2, where we would want to aggregate our information with Internet 2's information and see if we can isolate that down on an individual, at that level, circuit basis, right?
right.
okay, sorry to cut it off, guys. We gotta move on to automation.
No, we don't want to.
Yeah, I see that.
this is the opposite of the user group, right? It's
That's right.
I must say this is definitely shown that we need to have more talks about portals. Even something as simple as OneNet's IP views there was something that everybody wants now. So I think it's a good thing for us to add to the user group for more talks and more presentations, especially with the new stuff that Dan and his team are doing. So thank you, Dan.